Welcome to the Nagual Zone. I am Anaam, and today with us we have a very special guest, Russell Paul Arthur. Russell is the overseer of Grace Private Society, and I'm sure Russell will tell us more about it. Russell is here to talk to us today about a very powerful word that's gaining traction a lot in this world at this moment. I see this word being used in YouTube videos, across social media, increasingly so these days. And that word is sovereign. If we as humans are not interested in this word, then we deserve the fate that we get. This word and our application of it in our lives is what's going to save this world, or at least change this world enough so that we can all be happy with it. Russell will take us through three presentations, three videos. So watch out for the next two coming once a week. They'll drop. And I'll hand it over to Russell and he'll take us through part one. Russell, welcome. And
Yes,
what a pleasure to have you.
yes, and thank you very much. That was a great introduction into things. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to providing some very important information to your audience about sovereignty. And I'll do so in juxtaposition of citizenship, because those two are opposites. And for us to understand sovereignty, we need to talk a little bit about citizenship. So, yeah, I'm from an organization called Grace Private Society. I established this private society just over 4 years ago now, and I'm in the process of developing and perfecting the society. And I did so in response to the most simple way of putting this, the madness that's going on in the world out there, and seeing how the leaders or misleaders, whatever term you want to attach to them, were taking humanity down a very, very dark and dangerous path. So I realized something needed to be done and someone needed to do it. And so I was at a point in my life where I had the experience and the knowledge and the wisdom. I understood what was going on with the world from an overview perspective. And I knew that I could start to put something together. So I put this society together. I also formed our own private court. So anybody that becomes a member of our private society also gains protection from our own private court, which was formed um, fundamentally to honor, uphold, protect, and defend uh, natural and inherent human freedoms, values, and rights, which seem to be diminishing at an alarming rate today as we see the people in control and in power right now, from the governments, religion, royalty, banking, and all the rest of it. We seem to see that diminishing a lot. So we've established the private court, and we've also put together a sovereignty academy. So anybody that comes into our society that's fresh faced and doesn't really understand what sovereignty is all about, they can go through our academy, which is a 2 year process, and we give them the full works. They learn the knowledge, the skill sets, and they're able to put into place lawful procedures to transition from citizenship to sovereignty. And that's what I'm here to do today, to educate and enlighten your audience about specific aspects of sovereignty.
How wonderful. Looking forward to that. And it's high time that we all started to take responsibility for our own sovereignty in a fake system that I believe has been put in place out of perhaps original good intentions. Hard to know. However, there's nothing good about it now. And we need people like you to come and educate us. I mean, imagine if the work you're doing was taught to children in school. They
Yes,
that would be a
yes.
whole different game we'd be playing at this time. So without further ado, let's go for it. I think I've given you share screen, so all up to you.
Okay, so let's get into that. Right, can you see
Yep, I
the
can.
presentation?
Yeah, yes, it's appeared now.
Great. Okay. So here we've got the title of the presentation. It's called Private Estate Trust Presentation. And we are examining a deception of citizenship and how to restore sovereignty. So in this presentation, Anaam, we're going to be talking about trusts, which is very important, and you'll see why as we get into the presentations, trust law, and we're going to be talking about our lives and our estates, because as citizens of a nation state, we all operate with an estate, and an estate is everything that we own, that we earn, and also that we owe, whether that be real estate, property, possessions, investments, assets, and all the rest of it. And as we go through this presentation, you'll come to understand the importance of estates and also trust and trust law when it comes to citizenship and then restoring your sovereignty in this world. Because unfortunately, as I'm sure you'll understand, your audience will understand to a degree, that we are living in an inverted world at the moment.
Yes.
So let's move on to the next slide. Here we're going to get to a disclaimer and an advisory, which I think is very important. So this presentation is designed as a visual aid to conceptualize citizenship and sovereignty, and is not an exact representation of reality. So I think that's very important for everyone to know. And the information that is shared is a personal perspective that is based upon research, knowledge, and experience of the facts of reality. And it may include the error of interpretation and conveyance. What's also important is that the information does not constitute as or convey legal or financial advice. And as I always urge anybody that views one of my presentations, that is to do your own research to confirm the subject matter before drawing any conclusions. And do not act upon this information without consulting a practitioner of sovereign law. Is there anything you want to add to that?
That sounds really good. I think the best advice we can give each other in these times is to self-educate. Don't take anyone's word for it. Get the knowledge you need, and then take the trouble to self-educate, vet with your own research. And I think that's the best advice that we can give. So thank you for that.
100%. Let's move on to the next slide. So here we are beginning with a complete overview of the sovereign structure of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And this, make no mistake about it, this is a system of control and extortion. So we've got two very large words at the top there in blue, which is crown and state. State comes from the word that we know as nation state, because obviously we have the nation state of the United Kingdom. Nation is a community of people who have come together as one national identity, and the state is the government and politics of that community. The crown, which we know as the British crown, that is actually part of a crown empire. So it's not just the British crown, but it's all the European crowns from past, and every other crown that's part of any nation state in this world or the Commonwealth is part of a crown empire. And we'll get into that a little bit later in this presentation. And both the crown and state, they govern the public domain. So every one of us as a UK citizen, we are part of the general public. We all operate within a public domain, and the public domain is an area of control. It's a venue and jurisdiction controlled ultimately by the Crown and State, but also all the public agencies that are part of the state, and they control the public domain through public policy. And that public policy comes from all the legislated acts that are enacted in Parliament. So it really is a complete system of control, and every one of us as a UK citizen is in that public domain and under the dictates of legislated acts and public policy. So if we go to the far left of this presentation, we'll start to see the main aspects of the crown. And what we have on the very far left here is what's known as the triple crown. And this is the Triple Crown of the Vatican. So they are the head of the Crown Empire. And it's the Triple Crown of the Vatican that rules over all other crowns in this world. Of course, in the United Kingdom, we have the British Crown. And then we have the British Crown, which has the HM Treasury. And HM Treasury is the governing body for the Crown Commonwealth, which we'll get into later, which is all the land, people, and the resources of the United Kingdom. And then, of course, we have the government, the British government, or the UK government, if you like. And this is actually the administrative arm of the Crown. So the Crown are the top dogs in this picture. The government comes second because the Crown rules over the government. And let's not forget we have the Bank of England, because the Bank of England, being the central bank, controls the money supply, right? And if you control the money, you control the people. So those are the five big head honchos that are part of the Crown and the state. And then in the middle of this presentation, all down this section here, is we have the statutory bodies that were created by government. We have the public agencies, or the Crown and state agencies. That's everything from HM Land Registry, where people register their real estate. We have Companies House, where everybody registers their companies. We have all the police forces. We have the Royal Army, the Royal Navy. We have the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. We have the General Register Office, where we register for birth registration. We've got the Ministry of Justice, the district councils. All these agencies are all regulating the public domain. And that's what we have here. This gives us an overview picture of the sovereign structure of control and extortion, and kind of where everybody is in the hierarchy of things. Is there anything you want to add to this picture, Anaam?
I wanted to ask, is this map roughly applicable to other countries like USA, European countries, things like that?
Yes, so
Australia, Africa.
Yes, so with European countries and the USA, they're going to have a similar structure, because most countries in the Western Hemisphere, and as far over to Asia, have been structured into a sovereign structure, into corporate legal entities. And they do operate with the system of governance. And some of them do, if they don't have present sovereign crowns that you can see in the public, they certainly do have sovereign individuals or sovereign organizations in the background. And you might just see the government and a president or a prime minister. But they'll have a similar structure. And yes, they'll have the governance, they'll have the sovereigns behind the governance, they'll have the central bank, they'll have all the public agencies that are controlling everything from the food to the businesses to the health and welfare to the land, the real estate companies driving everything. And then you'll have the public domain. So yes, you will have a similar structure, albeit there'll be variations of it.
Okay.
So let's move on to the next slide, which brings us to a topic known as the Crown Corporation Soul. So everything that we just see in the previous slide, those, both the British Crown, HM Treasury, the government, and the Triple Crown, they are all established as a Crown Corporation Soul. And a Crown Corporation Soul is a unique and single legal entity and office that exists in perpetuity with a line of succession. So, for example, if we look at the British Crown, we have King Charles, right? He is the Prince Elector and the office holder of the British Crown. And then there is a line of succession. We have Prince William, who's next in line. And the reason that these sovereign entities and bodies and these sovereign individuals have been able to rule for many centuries is because they've established their structures that it continues in perpetuity, so that the mantle is always passed on to the next in line. So these organizations, these crown and state organizations, they are thinking hundreds and hundreds of years ahead. Okay, so they are well structured. Below the Crown Corporation Soul, we have the government and we have the public agencies. And these are public statutory bodies, which means that they have been granted into existence through state laws, and they are subdivisions of the Crown Corporation soul. So every agency from the government right down to the district councils and Companies House and DVLA, they are all corporate legal entities that all operate within a corporate legal venue jurisdiction. And then below that picture, at the bottom here, is where we have people, ordinary citizens like ourselves that register with Companies House and form a corporation. And what we're essentially doing when we register a business at Companies House is that we're actually incorporating our business into the Crown Corporation soul so that it becomes a part of the Crown estate and so that we operate as a franchise of their business. All right, that's how they're able to capture us into their system. And even the district council, I gave this example here, is Epping Forest District Council, because I'm from Epping, just outside of London, on the verge of Essex. And they, as a public statutory body, as a corporate legal entity, even they have a corporation, which they've registered at Companies House that's incorporated as a business. So if we go to the far right of this screen, because the whole thing is a business enterprise, right? They're here to do business and to earn money, whether that's money from tax or whether that's making money through profiteering. So if we look at Epping Forest District Council, for example, this was set up as a district, and the word district is a Roman word. It's a Roman Latin word that comes from Roman civil law, and it means to draw apart or set apart. And a district is not necessarily a county. It's not necessarily a town. It's just another area, another venue and jurisdiction of control that's under the control of the Crown Corporation soul. And the district council of Epping Forest, using this as an example, and this will be the same for all councils, for all local governments around the United Kingdom, this district council actually has its own company called the Qualis Group Limited, and that acts as a company for the council, and it's a parent company for a group of organisations that are focused on property development, asset management, and the delivery of services on behalf of the council. So that tells you that the council are here doing business. Yeah, they're doing business as a corporation, as a corporate entity, and they're not here for the people. They're here to make money as part of the Crown Corporation soul. So does that kind of make sense, what I've just explained there in that slide?
Yeah, that's fairly clear to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got no questions on this one.
Fine. Let's move on to the next slide. So let's get to the Crown Commonwealth. So the Crown Commonwealth is the land, the people, the resources, the buildings, the infrastructure, the assets, the commodities, the labour force, the lives and the estates of the general public. Everything that's of value in the United Kingdom is called the Crown Commonwealth. It's the wealth of the common, or the wealth of the commoners rather, or the wealth of the common land. And the Crown Commonwealth is governed by HM Treasury. Okay, so we've got HM Treasury that's working in collusion with the Bank of England and the government and the United Kingdom Debt Management Office. And those four corporate legal bodies are in collusion because there is an administrative ledger in HM Treasury which has a private side and a public side. And this is really important to us understanding what's going on with citizenship, as we'll discover as we get into the next slides. So if we talk about the public side of this ledger first, on the public side of this administrative ledger of HM Treasury, we have all the debt bondage. Okay, so this is false value. So what we have is we have the financial debt system on the public side of the ledger. So all the central banks across the Western hemisphere of the world, Europe, including America, and as far over across to Asia, they're all part of a debt-based global banking monetary system. And where the governments of each nation state borrows public funds from these central banks in the form of a fiat currency, and a fiat currency is a worthless piece of paper or a digital unit on your banking app or a worthless coin. It's a financial debt instrument because it has no value. So, for example, if I had a British £10 note, if you actually look at the £10 note, it says promise to pay the bearer. So what we're actually doing is we're handing over promissory notes, which are IOUs, which are promises to pay at a later date. Because you can't actually buy anything with the currency, it has no value. Because to actually buy something in law, you have to give a lawful consideration. You have to give like value for like value. And because we're paying for things with fiat currency, we're not actually buying anything. We're actually handing over financial debt instruments. And there's a reason for this, which we'll get to in the next slides. So in this financial debt system, there is only debt. We earn debt through fiat currency, and we have creditors and debtors. We can only create and trade with credit and debt. And we do not have access to the equity that is being controlled by HM Treasury. So on this ledger, Anaam, everything that's of real value, which is the equity holdings, which is the infrastructure, the buildings, the labour force, the real estate property, all the assets, commodities, everything that's part of the Commonwealth, all the equities on the private side of the ledger. But us as citizens of the UK, we are all functioning in a public domain, and we're in the public ledger, and we're engaged with debt bondage, and we have no access to the equity. And of course, as we both know, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, as a corporate legal enterprise that's in business, is in massive debt. It's part of a debt-based banking system, and that's why it has its own debt management office. Because the public funds it's borrowing from the central banks, and it's getting into debt with the central banks. And of course, the national debt includes the debt of all the businesses, the debt of individuals, which again is being borrowed from banks, right? So the total aggregate sum of all debt owed to the central banks is the national debt. And of course, it's an unsustainable and unrepayable debt. And here's the kicker. The system has been designed on purpose this way because it's a system of debt bondage. It's a system of debt slavery. If you can indebt people, whether it's business debt, mortgage debt, card debt, then you can control people. You can keep them working. You can keep skimming interest through usury, through debt payments on the debts. You can make money as a bank on the financial debt system. And of course, everything on the private ledger, which is governed by HM Treasury, this is being used as collateral to back and underwrite the debt administration of the public domain. So when HM Treasury instructs the British government to go and get new public funds, the creditworthiness of the Commonwealth is being used to underwrite those public funds from the bank. And that's why we have a private ledger and a public ledger. Does that kind of make sense what I've said there? Do you want to add anything to that slide?
I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I've known a little bit about this before, but this is a little bit more detailed, which I appreciate. And I did not know about the two ledgers, for example, the two administrative ledgers. And again, the question is, do you think this template is in rough terms being used by other countries, especially these ledgers, private and public ledgers?
Yes, it will be used in all countries because all countries are part of the same global banking monetary system. So you have all the central banks of all the nation states all throughout Europe, including the banking system, the Fed over in the United States, and some of the banks in Africa and going through into Asia. They're all part of this global banking monetary system. And it goes back to the Bank of International Settlements, which is the central bank of central banks. And they're based in Switzerland. And that's where there is a global banking cartel that controls all the banks worldwide. It's one global banking system. And all the nation states are in debt to these banks. And it's a debt they can never repay back. And it's by design because obviously if you are the creditor, you control the debtor. And when the debtor owes money to you and it cannot pay the money back because they have these nation states, so let's look at United Kingdom, for example, right? We get billions and billions and billions of national debt. It can never be paid back. So they're forever having to borrow more money to sustain the debt, which means they're creating more and more debt that can never be paid back. And the global banking cartel, the International Bank of Settlements, they are dictating the banking policy of all the national banks. Yeah. So it's more top down hierarchy and control. Our nation state, when I say our nation state, the nation state of the United Kingdom does not have financial sovereignty.
Mm.
All right. It's trading as a bankrupt enterprise. So it's pretty serious stuff. Let's
Yeah.
move on to the next slide, Anaam. Yeah, are we
Yeah.
finished here?
Yeah, I think we are.
Good. So on this next slide, we're going to get into trusts, trust arrangements. Okay. Trusts are one of the most important elements of structuring your estate in this world. So everybody has an estate, and an estate is everything that they earn, own, and owe. So it's everything from real estate, property, possessions, personal possessions, business ventures, investments and assets, even the money in the bank. It's all part of your estate. And trust law and trusts are part of the state, and trust law is one of the highest laws of the land. Okay, it's right up there with contract law. And I'm bringing your attention to trust arrangements because this is going to be very relevant to citizenship, which we'll discuss in the next two slides. So, when a trust is formed, there are principles for the formation of a trust, and these principles are in accordance with trust law. So, for a trust arrangement to exist, there is someone known as a trustee that manages a piece of property for a beneficiary. Okay. And what happens is they go into this trust arrangement. So there'll be a person known as the grantor or settlor, which places something of value into a trust arrangement. That value can be real estate property, could be cars, could be an asset, could be investment, could be a sum of money, and it gets placed into a trust arrangement as trust property. And then what happens is there is a split in the property title. One side, there is a trustee that holds the legal title to the trust property, and on the other side, there is the beneficiary that holds the equitable title and benefits from the value of the trust. Now, in this arrangement, the trustee holds the legal responsibility and the liability for the trust property and must manage and maintain the trust property for the beneficiary. And that includes paying all the bills, all the debts, all the fees, all the fines, anything that's charged to the trust property when they manage it. The beneficiary just simply owns the equitable title, which means owns the rights to the value of the trust and can receive income from the trust property, can even use the trust property and enjoy the trust property, but doesn't have any say or control over the trust property. That's a trust arrangement. And there are two types of trusts. There is an expressed trust, and this is a fully declared and fully disclosed trust that has terms and conditions that are written into a trust document, and these terms and conditions are agreed by the person that settles the trust, the trustee, and the beneficiary. Then we have what's known as an implied trust. And this trust is a trust arrangement that is formed without declaration and without disclosure, and where the trust exists through the operations of trust law. So that means if the principles of trust law are in place, if there's a trustee that's holding a legal title, and there's a beneficiary that holds the equitable title, and there is a property that the trustee is holding, then there is, by the implications of trust law and the operations of trust, there is an implied trust. Whether it's been spoken about and agreed openly or not, that trust exists by operations of law. And that's very important for this next slide, which I'm going to show you when it comes to citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
Before I move on to this slide, did you want to ask any questions about that previous slide, Anaam, or are you okay for me to go on to this next one?
I had a question there. Is can those roles be switched around whilst the trust is active? For example, a beneficiary becomes a trustee, or the trustee moves on to become a grantor or a settlor, or does that happen, or are the roles fixed?
That's a really good question. So once a trust has been formed, it can be formed as a revocable or irrevocable trust. So with a revocable trust, the person that creates the trust, which is the grantor or the settlor, if they've created a revocable trust, they can reverse the trust and take everyone back to their original positions, which means the property goes back to the grantor and the settlor, the trust ends, and the legal title no longer belongs to the trustee, and the trustee no longer has a role in that trust. The trust is finished. If it's an irrevocable trust, the trust will be set for a certain amount of time. So it'll be 20 years, 25 or 30 years, quite a long period of time. And at the end of that period of time, the trust property will go to the beneficiary of the trust, because the beneficiary of the trust is the true owner of the trust, the true owner of the trust property. And equity means value. And therefore, because the beneficiary holds the equitable title, the beneficiary is entitled to the full property of the trust. But the beneficiary can never, while a particular trust exists, the beneficiary can never be the trustee, because that would violate the principles of trust law. For a trust to exist, there must be a trustee and there must be a beneficiary. The trustee cannot be the beneficiary, and the beneficiary cannot be the trustee. The trustee is responsible for controlling the trust property, and the beneficiary does not control the trust property, can only receive value. Does that answer your question on that?
Yeah, the question of trusts is so deeply tied to sovereignty, in my opinion, in terms of this material world, living in materiality. We must operate with money, we must operate with assets, we must accumulate. No matter how much of a monk you are, you're still going to wear a red shawl if you're a Buddhist, and that shawl is yours, right? So living in this place, you can't get away from trusts. And trust at its core seems to me to be an agreement made by two parties without coercion, without manipulation, and a sovereign agreement, right? In a sense. And I think that understanding trust goes a long, I'm talking out loud now. It seems to me that understanding trust on a deep level, trusts, legal trusts, and all these kind of stuff really does, it's one of the most empowering things an individual can do in this world, because it seems to me that is directly tied up with material sovereignty. Without understanding trusts, how they work, what happens if a trustee dies and the other two are still alive, what do they do? What happens if the grantor dies and those two are still alive, or all three die, what happens, right? Knowing all the implications, or, one of them doesn't want to be whatever role they are in anymore. Usually trusts, in my experience, are established when the grantor or settlor is about to pass away, and then they've got a lot of wealth or a bit of wealth to manage, so they establish a trust so that it doesn't get pilfered by her and his majesties directly. In terms of tax, the word itself is very telling. Tax, it's this day was taxing on me. It means burdensome on the energy, burdensome, tax. Anyway, so thank you for bringing this whole trust information here. And I'm looking forward to knowing more about it. I've never really given all this much thought, but as we're going on, I'm finding out how important this is to know about. And this, this should be treated as basic knowledge. This isn't anyone who's thinking, oh my God, this is doing my head in, or, oh, it's too complicated. You're out of touch, mate. You are out of touch. So any of you who are watching this, you're getting bored, you're getting this, you're getting that, take a deep breath, pause the video, go take a drink of water, and come back and watch this damn thing. Okay? It's important. It's for you. It's to empower you. So tomorrow you don't get to blame the government, blame this and blame that, because you didn't bother to empower yourself. So get on your ass and get your thinking cap and get your analytical cap and any caps you want to wear and get through these videos, these 3 videos. Okay. There's a reason why I'm posting these, and there's a reason why Russell is taking his time to explain all this to us. All right. On that ass kicking note,
That's
Russell,
really
please
good.
carry on.
That's really good. You raised some very important aspects of trusts and the importance of trust. And I just want to elaborate on that a little bit before we move further. There's 2 other types of trusts in this world, and there is public trusts and private trusts. And what you're about to discover, as a UK citizen, if you form a trust and you form it as a UK citizen and you go to the Trust Registration Office in the United Kingdom and register your trust with the Crown, you will incorporate your trust into the Crown, and then your trust will be subject to all the trust laws, tax codes, and regulations. And they will go to town on any property, the value of anything you hold in a trust. Whereas the opposite of that is to achieve sovereignty. And there's a process for doing that, which your audience will discover through these presentations, and then create a private trust that is not registered in the public domain, not registered in the system. This is perfectly lawful. And it is a trust that is set up in your own private law, in your own private domain, that fully protects the value of any property that you place into that trust from any of the tax codes in the public domain. And not a lot of people are aware of this, because unfortunately we don't get taught these important things, do we? Which we should do in the schools and the education system. And then this information is kept from us for a very important reason.
Exactly.
The people don't want us knowing this information.
Yeah, it's intentional. It's totally intentional. And to be honest, if I was the predator in this scenario, I'd do exactly the same. Why give the slaves the freedom to not work for me? If I own slaves, this is exactly how I would run it. Do you know what I mean? So as I said, as we were talking before, and I've expressed to you, I have nothing but admiration for these people, these predators, these entities, these non-human entities that goes right to the top of it, the food chain. And they know what they're doing, and they're organized, and they're super motivated, they plan, as you said, hundreds of years ahead. And it's a phenomenal work they do in this world, in the sense of they do what they do, in my opinion, very impeccably.
It is a very sophisticated system, very sophisticated. You do have to take your hat off at what they've done, how far they've gotten, how they've managed to all come together and keep it going and perfecting it. But that also means we've got a lot of work to do on our side of things to get the information out there. So that brings me to this slide here, where we get into citizenship and birth registration, because that's where we start to see ourselves as UK citizens start to become incorporated into public trusts. And so if we look to the left side of this screen, where we've got the act of registration. At the act of registration, now put a living man or woman, but of course, at the time we are infants, we are babies, and it's our parents that register our births. But what happens is, we as a living being, if you like, we are the sole heir and living beneficiary of our life and estate. And what happens is, when our birth is registered at the General Register Office, they create, through that registration, they create a legal person, an entity known as the UK citizen. Yeah.
Just a little pause there. I heard someone, I think it was last year, I think it was Jordan Maxwell, the illustrious late Jordan Maxwell. I don't know if you know his work. Fantastic gentleman. And he said that registration, anything, you register your car, you register whatever you register, it's going into a registry, and it's a form of IOU. Now you created a contract, and you are now handing over ownership, legal ownership, to whoever you registered with, whatever you registered with, whatever it is. And they actually, you handed over ownership, legal ownership. For example, you register your car with the car dealer or with the Volkswagen or whatever. Now Volkswagen owns that car. They've sold it to you, and they now own it back in all legal terms, because now you've created a contract It's on their registry. It's not on, you haven't got a register. It's on their registry. And he was explaining it in such a way that I felt it was very easy to understand. And I really understood the legal implications of registration.
Yes.
You know, whether you register a pet or a human being or a car or a house or whatever, that registration is the gateway, I feel.
Yes, it is.
You know, that closes
It,
behind you once you once you enter that door.
and it all begins, Anam, at birth registration, because that is the primary act. That's the very first act that you be, place your life into legal bondage with the Crown and State. It all begins there. That's your entry point into the system.
Yeah,
And
your
once you
life is an IOU at that point.
Absolutely. Everything you do from that point onwards, you do as a UK citizen, you do as a legal person, which, by the way, is not real. It's a fiction in law. Yeah. It's defined by legislative acts. So, what's really important is that we must be completely conscious of the fact that there is a distinction and separation between the living being and the UK citizen. The UK citizen is a legal person and entity which is different to the living being that registers their life with the Crown and State. But in the sovereignty movement, people seem to think, oh, okay, well, I'm not the UK citizen. So anything that I've done as the UK citizen no longer applies in my life now because I'm now declaring sovereignty. But that's not actually accurate, because as the living man or woman, you are a bonded surety for the citizen. So when you, let's say you go to the bank and open up a bank account in the name of the UK citizen, and you sign a contract with the bank, then your signature, which is the signature, the sign of your nature of being a living being, you are endorsing that contract and saying, yeah, I'm the signature for this, I'm the guarantor for this UK citizen and what they're doing with your bank. So I always say to people, listen, now you found out that you're not the UK citizen, you are still liable for that UK citizen and they will still hold you responsible. So hold your horses before you think you're going to do anything or you're going to ignore contracts and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So the birth registration, and it places your actual life into the jurisdiction of the Crown and State, into the corporate legal world as a franchise of the Crown and State. And you are become an entry into the record of vital statistics. And of course, statistics is a derivative of state. So now you're a record of the state, and vital is a derivative of the word vitae, which means life. So now they've got a record of your life, which is part of the state, and you are now legally recognised and recorded as part of the Crown Commonwealth. So the value of your life in the state is now part of the administrative ledger of HM Treasury. And then what happens is, because we're none the wiser, we don't get taught this at school, we assume the role of the UK citizen. Yeah, I'm a British citizen. Yeah, I belong to the United Kingdom. That's where I live. And, you know, I now become the legal franchise of the Crown and State. I now identify as the citizen. And the surname, this is really important, the surname is the legal linchpin. Okay, the surname that we all have is not actually our name. It's a state-created name. It was created hundreds of years back. I think we can go as close to the Napoleon era, when Napoleon was doing his empire building throughout Europe, and he started to institute a state-created name, which became a surname, and that was basically a state branding of people that were being captured into the state. They were given a surname, which is a surety name, to say that, yes, they are stock of the state, they belong to us, and that's their identification. And so anything you do in the system, they identify you through your surname. That's the legal linchpin. And here's the really important part, because we're going to get back to trust now. When we gain the birth certificate, the birth certificate is a legal title and bond that is issued from the Crown to the citizen. And then what happens is, as the UK citizen, we are now holding the birth certificate. The birth certificate is property of the Crown. We call it my birth certificate. It's not. It was issued from the crown. It's crown property. So when they give us the birth certificate, what are they doing? They're forming an implied trust.
Mm. Yes.
We now become the trustee of that birth certificate, which is a legal title and bond, which is bonded to the crown, the state, the corporate legal world, and all the legislated acts, statutes, rules, regulations, and everything that's bonded to that certificate. And we are holding it as a trustee who is now responsible and liable for it. That's what happens with birth registration. That begins our life into legal bondage with the crown and state. What's your views on that?
Yes, absolutely. That is a vicious triangle. I think we become the trustee. Guess who's the beneficiary? I'll leave the viewers to figure that one out. Who's the beneficiary of that trust, and who's the guarantor and the provider of all the, the straw man is the, I'll give a hint, the straw man, the legal entity, the UK citizen or whatever citizen is the one that's at the top, that's producing all the wealth for the beneficiary. And so that makes perfect sense to me. I might be making it very broad, very, and I'm sure there are many details to that.
There is.
But fantastic so far. I'm enjoying this very much. Thank you.
You're going to be surprised about the beneficiary part as we move on.
Ah,
Okay.
right. Okay. Well, there's a hidden caveat. Maybe there is a way out for us in the end.
Let's get into this. Let's reveal it as we're going along. So this just again gives another overview of what's happening with the implied trust. So the citizen is the implied trustee. We've got the British government, which is the administrative arm of the crown. We've got the Register Office, which is a state agency that issues the birth certificate. And what happens is there is a trust formed and there is the split in the title. We assume the role of the UK citizen, which is the trustee holding the legal title. And we are also the beneficiary of the public trust.
All
right.
Nice.
Because our life and estate as the living man or the living woman is the beneficiary of the trust. But both the citizen as a state-owned and state-controlled entity is controlled by the Crown Estate. And also because our life and estate has been registered to the Crown Estate, that is also under the control of the Crown Estate, who have taken the position of being the default administrators and executors of our life and estate. Because what happens, Anaam, at birth registration, we completely abandon our sovereignty. We place our life and estate into the ward of the state, which means into the care of the state, and they become the big daddy. So basically what happens is we're now incompetent, we're now infantiles, we are not capable of administrating our own life and estate. So that now gets taken over by HM Treasury, which are controlling the equity side of it, which belongs to us as the living beneficiary. But we are duped into playing the role of the citizen, which is on the trustee side, on the public side. So there is a split in the ledger at that point that we form the registration with the Crown Estate. It's very clever the way they've done it. Very clever. But this all stems back to the days of the empire building, because the British Isles, the United Kingdom, this was all formed through land invasions and conquests going back hundreds. We only have to go as far back as the Roman Empire, right? When the Open Empire stood foot on the shores of the British Isles, they didn't arrive with a bouquet of flowers, did they, in good tidings? They came here by military force, and they raped, pillaged, plundered, brutalized, and it was under the threat of penalty of death. You're becoming part of the Roman Empire, right? And you're now being placed under Roman civil law, which was a law of slavery, masters and slaves. And everything that we see today, from the governance to the banking to the civil laws, everything that controls us as citizens, it all stems from the Roman Empire. So every crown that's come to the British Empire, we look at what's another crown? William the Conqueror. Yeah. So William the Conqueror made a pact with the Holy Roman Empire, the Vatican, to go and take over the British Isles and introduce the Doomsday Book, right? And what was the Doomsday Book? It was harvesting all the land, the people, and resources and bringing them under state control, bringing them under state record and recognition. And that was the building of the slavery system that we see today, which is now well established and perfected. And that means everything of real and true value has been literally captured by these sovereign individuals and institutions. And everybody has been reduced to the diminished status and standing of being a citizen and a trustee in this arrangement. So it really is quite bad the way things have gone. And because we're now in this structure of hierarchy, all these problems that we're facing in this world today, people are feeling very helpless. People are feeling very under the thumb by the Crown and State. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to correct the situation. And people are just not aware of the fact that our lives are so controlled, so controlled, every aspect with all these public agencies. We think we're free. We think we're free because we can move about. We can jump in a car and go drive down the road. We go to a shop and buy something. Yeah, but we haven't got true freedom. Everything down to the way we drive on the roads, what we buy in the supermarkets, it's heavily, heavily regulated. And of course, it's all part of the corporate legal business enterprise of the Crown and State.
Yeah, well, I often joke with my friends here that there's nothing called wildlife in the UK. It's wild regulated life in the UK. There's nothing called wildlife. Every deer is accounted for, every pigeon is accounted for, every damn thing, every rabbit, there is nothing called wild life here. Anything that's truly wild, they kill off, like wolves, anything. There's nothing. This island is one of the most uh, it must be second only to a place like Dubai, which is literally terraforming a desert into a Lego toyland. In Dubai, there is no tree, no bird chirps there that hasn't been imported, no tree grows there that hasn't been artificially grown. Nothing. There's no brick, no nothing. If Dubai was uninhabited tomorrow, it would take 7 days before the desert would claim it back right again, right? Everything, every drop of water, there's nothing that is actually natural in Dubai, in a place like Dubai, right? It's a completely artificial biosphere. And
Yes.
second only to that is this island here where the illusion of wildlife and wilderness and forests, there are no forests here. It's all regulated stuff. It's an
Big time.
illusion. Yeah. So it
And
just reminded me of that when you were saying all that.
it's interesting because as you're saying that, I'm thinking of I'm something that really stuck in my mind once was when I was traveling through France, and then I come up to the coast to go across, obviously, the channel into the UK. And I remember arriving at the port, and it was like I was arriving at the gates of an open air prison.
Mm.
Yeah, you go past one wall through the coach, and then you go to another set of walls and barbed wire, another set of walls, another set of walls. I was thinking, gosh, this is like arriving into a prison or something. This is like it's almost like a huge open air prison, and we're all having what's the same? We're all having a tea party in an open air prison, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
it
I
is.
mean, I was thinking the other day, this thought just struck me is no one it's brilliant. It really is. There is no human being that can travel anywhere actually travel at will to where they want to go. Can't do that. You can't exit without what's called a visa. You can't enter anywhere without a visa. You can't go anywhere without a passport. You can't buy a plane ticket, train ticket, or you cannot travel unless they allow it, right?
Yes.
It's complete. People think we have freedom of travel. No, you don't have actual freedom of travel. You can't just go anywhere. There used in yours and my time, there used to be two countries called East Germany and West Germany. One was so-called communist country, and the other one was a so-called capitalist country. Why I'm saying that is, in those days, a West German couldn't just travel to East Germany, and an East German couldn't just up and go to West Germany. Everything would be locked. Reasons would be given. They will allow you to go or not go anywhere, right? But
Yes.
that's no longer so in this day. In this day, a West German can go into East Germany. It's the same. So they own the map.
That's right.
These people draw the lines. Tomorrow, the lines that you think are your country can just as easily be raised, and new restrictions imposed on where you can travel, and how you can travel there, and what time and when, and everything, and all the airlines and tickets and bookings, everything will mysteriously it takes 3 administrative days. It will completely
Yes.
align to that new lines on the map. It's that fictional and it's that effective. And we all live in this great illusion that we are free to travel. No, absolutely not.
Yes.
Not by any stretch of the imagination.
And then it takes something like a big whopping pandemic to come along to
Yeah.
really open a lot of people's eyes to what's really going on in the world. And unfortunately, a lot of people still remain asleep even after a big event like that. But yeah,
Yeah,
we are in we are in land masses that are under the jurisdiction of powerful, sovereign corporations that control absolutely everything.
absolutely
So,
everything. And very experienced, very professional, very, very, very good at what they do, very organized. I'm always amazed at how organized and efficient and machine-like it is. So there you go. Anyway, over to you again.
yes, no worries. So, we're still on a subject of citizenship, and we're talking about how public trusts are formed. So, in the public domain, and we touched on this very early, or you did, Anaam, every time that you register for something as a UK citizen, every time you register for something with a public agency, the public agency issues you a public instrument. And that public instrument is issued in the form of a title, a bond, a certificate, or a contract, and it has a legal obligation. And the instrument is property of the agency that's issuing it. So if you register your vehicle with the DVLA, they're going to issue DVLA documents. Those documents belong to the DVLA because they are property of the DVLA. And guess what? They have designated you as the trustee to hold on to their documents, which means you're now responsible and liable for all the legislated acts, laws, penalties, fees, fines, and everything that's bonded attached to those documents, because you're now a trustee in that arrangement. You're in a public trust arrangement.
Mm.
And interestingly, and again, we spoke about this earlier, even though it's the citizen, the legal person that's the trustee, you as the living man, because you went up and you signed the document with your signature, which is the sign of your nature. When you look at the word, break it down, you are now the guarantor. You are placing the value or creditworthiness of your life and estate, which is the real value, as the guarantor for the citizen when you sign that document. And this becomes really important when we start talking about other public trust arrangements. So let's talk about the big one, the real estate property, because of course, that's a big money maker for the Crown and State. Huge taxes are applied to real estate property, right? And perhaps the biggest one would be the inheritance tax, which I think is about 40%, isn't it? 40%,
Yeah,
somewhere around.
I mean, I'm not aware of the details of the inheritance tax, but the
Yeah,
very idea is
I
is
know, it's crazy.
abhorrent. It's like, well, what next then?
But this is it. The Crown and State, these people at the top, what they have formed is a predatorial and parasitical entity that feeds off the
Yes.
UK citizens, that feeds off the public domain. It's been structured with that hierarchy of control and extortion because
Yeah.
they are raking in fortunes from the public domain from the UK citizen. So
Well,
if we,
I would also add, now it's everywhere in the world. What a surprise, because it's the one world government, and it's the VAT.
yes,
VAT, value added tax. Nothing about that term makes any sense except when you look at it legally. And only in legalese does it actually make sense, because the word value in legal terms has a different meaning. When you add something in a contract, value added in a contractual legal terms, it means something else, adding something. And tax is obviously, you and me understand it as paying the tax, but the legal implications, as obviously you know more than me, of the word tax are very, very different. In court, the judge is hearing that very differently. The tax lawyers are understanding that word very differently than the average Joe or Joanna, and
yes,
it's so important to know about this stuff.
it is. And that word legal, which is a trigger word for me, but that word legal is synonymous with the word regal.
Mm.
That's where it comes from. It's part of that word. And regal means royal. Yeah.
How interesting.
Because
Yeah.
because this is a corporate legal system that comes from royalty and religion, which are the Crown Empire, which is a coalition of royal houses and the Vatican that have gone throughout the Western Hemisphere through what they call their age of discovery, when the popes issued the papal bulls and said, "Go forth and plant your flags in these lands, and we'll take them in." No, it wasn't. It was the age of conquest, where they sent military warships into these lands and they took control and completely desecrated the indigenous populations of these lands and put them into slavery and done all sorts of things, and awful, awful, awful times in history. But that's how they were managed to put their structure into place around most of the world. I mean, it's as far out into where was I recently? We were speaking about this earlier. I was in Vietnam, and I was in a city called Hanoi, which is in North Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And Hanoi is a city that was taken over by the French colonists way back in I think it was the 14th and 16th century, somewhere around there. And they were, of course, in collusion with the Vatican, part of the Crown Empire. And if you go through the city, everything is separated into districts and wards,
Mm.
which are venues and jurisdictions, which is very similar to the United Kingdom. And of course, they have the civil law, they have the same government structure and the same banking. So they are pretty much in all four corners of the earth, this sovereign structure. But getting back to this public trust arrangement, this is very important for your audience to know. As a UK citizen, if you want to buy a home, then you're going to register that home with HM Land Registry, right? And what happens is when you register your home with HM Land Registry, they give you a property title. And when they issue that property title is property of the Crown and State, and they're issuing it to you as the trustee in this arrangement. And now you're holding the legal responsibility and liability for that property title. And the Crown Agency issues that property title to the citizen, who becomes the lease holder or the free holder of the property title. So you don't actually own your property. Your property is placed into a public trust arrangement with the Crown
Mm.
and State. Okay, so the property that you're sitting in is in a public trust, and the trust owns the property. Okay, HM Treasury control the equity of it, which they use as part of the Crown Commonwealth, which they use to underwrite public funds. And you in this arrangement are a leaseholder or a freeholder, because you are holding the property title as a trustee. So the property title is an instrument that represents the real value of the property as secured in the Crown Commonwealth. But the property title is a false value, right? It's not real value. The real value is the property itself.
Mm.
But what's happened is you are not the owner of the property, although you have ownership rights, but you don't own the property. Owning a property and having ownership rights, which means you have owner's rights to the property, is different than owning the property. And the ownership rights you have is the rights to hold the property, rights to possess the property, right to sell and profit from the property. But you don't actually own the property because it's in a public trust. The moment you go to the HM Land Registry and register your property, you're doing it as a franchise of the state. And that's why, as a UK citizen with a property title in your hands as a trustee, you are liable for all the laws, regulations, taxes, and penalties that are attached to that title. And that's an implied trust arrangement. That trust arrangement is never disclosed to you, never disclosed, never expressed to you in writing. That trust arrangement exists by the operations of trust law. The very fact that you've taken a property title into your hand and you're holding that property of the Crown Estate means you're a trustee in an implied trust arrangement. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's like monetizing the power of trust, you know.
Yeah.
We as human beings or animals in nature, everything kind of trust is a big part of it, you know.
Yes.
We wouldn't be able to exist here without being able to trust each other at some level, at least, you know, or some level of trust. And what a brilliant stroke of genius to come along and monetize that basic instinct, almost, in a sense. Trust does mean survival in nature.
Yes.
A group of hunters needs to trust each other when they're out in the jungle getting food for the tribe, right? And along comes a third party and monetizes that trust. It's just, it's like, I have nothing but admiration for these predators, you know, these vampires, these, and I mean that literally. I mean that word literally. But anyway, so enough. Please carry on.
But it's really interesting what you're bringing to these presentations, and I'm loving what you're saying because you are so bang on the money with this. Because we are trusting our government, right, to do the right thing. We are entrusting them with the property to look after because that's what they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be there as the mediators in this arrangement between us as the buyer of the property or the seller of the property in that arrangement. So, the trust they've got us with the implied trust. It's how they managed to capture.
Absolutely, it's really just quite amazing, and you know, same with any corporation. You know, people trust Colgate to make toothpaste that won't damage their teeth. But is that trust abused or is that trust placed properly? You know, what is a fluoridated toothpaste anyway? And what the hell is a toothpaste anyway? You know, what is nature that incompetent? Are our gums that bad? You know, no, because the food we eat is so such garbage, you know, and that's all. So, you know, we trust, and we have to trust throughout the day, trust. And most of the time, if it's a big company that's involved, corporation means incorporated, as in materialized, as in a body, legal entity. Entities are usually not associated with humans. A legal entity, a regal entity. Who are these entities? What are we incorporating? When we fill forms, the human form, the animal form, we're filling a form. What are we filling that form with? Right? So it's all in the language. It's the entire system can be taken apart in terms of knowledge just by looking at the language, I feel. And the next logical step from looking at the language is to then look at the legal language of it.
It's very interesting what you just said there. I'm just going to pick up on the word that you said there, form, because when you start using forms to register something, what you're doing is the matter that you're registering, you're placing into the form, into the legal form of their venue and jurisdiction.
Yes.
The moment you use one of their forms, and they've got many codes for their forms, which are all part of their corporate legal venue and jurisdiction. And the moment you do that, You've basically said, okay, I agree to all your terms in your venue and jurisdiction. I placed this matter of my life and my estate into the form of your legal venue and jurisdiction. Yes, very
Yeah,
clever
absolutely.
stuff.
And it's total strong arming, or what's it called? What's the other word for it? Where the thugs come around to your shop and take their weekly cut.
It's
What's that called? Uh,
racketeering.
yes, it's just literally that. Because if you refuse to do all this as an play nice with them, then you get the uniforms knocking on the door.
You do.
You know, so it's like they've got you one way or the other, and I'm sure there are ways to turn this to one's benefit, and that is one of the reasons why I was so happy that uh, you are able to do this, because first we get the picture right, and then we figure out, and there are ways to get out of that, these contracts, these infernal contracts, infernal contracts. And the entire game is contracts. The entire
Yes,
game, I feel, is verbal or written contracts. Signature, as you said, sigil, the nature, a sigil that depicts our unique nature. This is my sigil that depicts my unique nature as a living man. These are sigils that we are. It's a very occult. When you come down to it, it's a very occult based system. And in the occult world, I can tell you this: contracts are everything. The entire world of the occult works on contracts, and contracts are taken extremely seriously. As with in this scenario, contracts are taken extremely seriously. And I think knowing the true nature of what we are contracting, in English we say, I contracted a disease, right? He contracted tuberculosis, made a contract with that disease, right? Contracts. So I love to look at these words, because the next
yes,
logical step from the language itself is the legal, because they're using the same language to create these contracts, and you got to know what they mean, what the other party means when they are using these words, and which is what
yes.
you're so brilliantly explaining.
Yeah, that's a very important point that you've mentioned there. In this legal and corporate world, they have their own language. And because it's become part of everyday life for everybody within the nation state, everyone's using that language. So, yes, I'm a director of a business. Okay. So what you're saying is you're not a living man, a living and breathing man. You're a director, and director is a legal title. So you're saying I'm a legal title within the venue and jurisdiction of the Crown Estate. That's what you're saying, because you're using their language and you're identifying as a legal title. Which brings us to this slide here, which is again another public trust arrangement. And it's when we to do with business ventures. So of course, most people start up a business, and then most people get the idea that I'm going to go and register that business with Companies House. And of course, the moment you register the business with Companies House, you are forming a corporation, and that corporation is incorporated into the Crown Corporation soul of the Crown Estate. So what you're effectively doing is you're creating a franchise of the state as a corporation. And the certificate is actually an incorporation certificate.
Yeah,
So again,
you
it's in
you
the word, isn't it?
yeah, you basically this you were basically willing to represent them. You become their representative in that business. You're working on behalf of them to work this business, which they don't tell you is not yours. It's theirs. As soon as you registered it, it stopped being your business and
That's
became
it.
their business.
Yes. And of course, because you have registered your business, they've given you that certificate, which is a bond. which
Mm.
represents the real value of the business interests that are secured at HM Treasury and Crown Commonwealth. And you receive that certification title as a shareholding trustee who is now responsible for the obligations that are attached to that corporate enterprise.
Yeah, in other words, an
Um,
IOU, isn't it?
yeah,
It's a
yes,
fancy
it is.
IOU in the end, because if you don't do what you have contracted with us to do about this business that you have brought to us, you brought it to us. We didn't, you brought this idea, whatever it is, to us. You made you sigiled your nature onto this contract, and you have agreed to our terms and conditions about it. So I can see how it is completely fair and legal in the
And
eyes
it's
of the creditor.
yes, and it's clever as well, Anand, because they've brought out a legislative act that says if a UK citizen is
Yes,
starting up a business, they must register it with
you
Companies
must
House.
register.
And of course, but that doesn't refer to a living person, right? A living man doesn't have to do that.
Yes,
But
yes,
if you are assuming and identifying as a UK citizen, oh, well, okay, then I must go and do it because it's a legal requirement.
exactly.
So that's another way that they get you. So you've got your real estate property, which is one of your highest values in terms of the wealth that you generate, and then you've got your business, which is again another value generating aspect of your life and estate that they are able to capture through registration into their public agency as a franchise of the Crown and State, and where now you as a trustee are legally responsible and liable for all the laws, regulations, taxation, penalties, and all the rest of it. So the citizenship, the deception, and the fraud. So what do we know? At the very top, we've got the British government, we've got the Bank of England, the central bank, we've got HM Treasury, and we've got the Debt Management Office of the UK. And there is a public ledger and a private ledger. On the public ledger is where you are as a citizen, if that's what you're going to identify as and act as, which is a role that you play, where you are agreeing to play the role of a legal person, which is a legal entity. On the public ledger, you have a public estate that is incorporated into the Crown Estate, as we've just discussed. You have a legal status, which means you are under the jurisdictional control of the Crown Estate. In this position, you are a legal title holder, which means you're responsible and liable for everything that the Crown and State imposes onto your life, whether it's onto your property, onto your business, or any other aspects of your life and state. And on the public ledger, as a citizen, you are an insolvent debtor. You earn debt in a form of fiat currency that has no
Yeah.
real value. You own debt because you only own the debts of the property, which is the mortgage. Yeah, you don't actually own the actual property itself. That's in a trust of the Crown Estate. And you trade in debt because you're trading again with fiat currency. That's all happening on the public ledger. On the private ledger, you could claim, establish, and correct your status and standing in this world to be a living man or woman. And that is what you really are. And where you can live with a private estate, which was never registered into the public domain, where you are the sole heir and living beneficiary of your estate, where you have sovereign status, which is a natural and inherent freedoms and rights are intact to self-govern, self-direct, self-determine your own life in accordance with your own free will and personal conscience. And in this position on the private side, you are the equitable title holder. So you are the owner of the real value of everything that's in your life, and you are whole and solvent. So you have an option in this world. You can continue playing the role of the citizen, playing along with the deception and the fraud, or you can choose to restructure the affairs of your life and estate when you achieve sovereignty, which is a process we'll talk about in a moment. And you can sever and separate your actual life from legal bondage with the Crown and State. There is a lawful procedure to do it. And that option is available to
Mm.
anyone that wants to venture down that pathway, who has got to a place in their life and then where they've, or a state of consciousness where they realize something's badly wrong out there. They've seen through the lies. They know that it's a very wicked and evil system that was designed to enslave humanity. And they're now looking for a remedy. They're now looking for a new way forward. They're thinking of how they can create a better future for themselves, for the people they love, for the rest of humanity. If you're in that situation in your life, then sovereignty might be the way forward for you. And it's definitely, as I'm going to show you in the next few slides, it's definitely a way for you to get remedy and unwind from the system and restore your freedoms, values, and rights. Would you like to add something to that?
Yes, I think we're coming to the good stuff now. We've had our dose of cold water thrown on our heads, which is very needed. Everyone's got their head up either up their ass or in the sand. I used to be one of them. And this is, you have such a great knack for making these are quite complicated things you've explained. Or they can be explained in a very complicated way, but you've done it in such a visually easy way, simple way. It's easy to follow. The way you explain is easy to, follow along and get those concepts in here where they can be integrated. And I'm thinking, Russell, how about we, this would be a very sweet spot to end this podcast. And then we start with the good news in part two next Saturday. What do you think of
Sounds
that?
good. I'm all
Yeah.
good for that. Yes, for sure.
Yeah, I'm feeling like we've just hit the sweet spot between this feels like a complete part one, and then the good
Yeah.
news in part two. All right, how do we go about, creating private ledger, reclaiming our sovereignty in terms of a living man / woman, so on and so forth. So I want people to be a little bit hungry and excited and curious about that. And so, people, this is a series that Russell is doing for free. So please make sure you watch these videos to the end and take notes. If this is difficult for you, this is your first time that you've come across all of this, and it can be quite like, what am I even hearing? I don't understand any of this. Okay, that's fine. Go over them again and again. Be impeccable with what you're hearing and what you want to learn. Don't just do a half-assed job and think, just another video, blah, blah, blah. Who loses out with that attitude? Hmm? You lose out. So take notes, rewind, look at these amazing slides. I'm telling you, these are very simply done. Only someone who has extremely in-depth understanding can make it look so easy. Okay, so Russell's coming to you for free right now. This is a YouTube video for free. So don't take this for granted, and please educate yourself. Okay. Personally, I couldn't give a fuck if you do or you don't, but I do care that you do because that impacts me and I get to live in a better world. So in the end, it's a very selfish request. Okay. On that note, let's close this one. Russell, any last things until we drop another video next week?
No, I think we've concluded what we need to do here today. We've enlightened and educated the audience with some very important facts about what's going on with citizenship. And like you said, let's leave the juicy stuff, the good stuff, for a second episode where I could really show people a practical, lawful, and peaceful remedy to reverse the dynamics, to become sovereign, to become a master of your own life and estate, and start to restore your freedoms, values, and rights. So that's where I'll leave it for now.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Thank you, Russell. And as we said before, these videos are going to be dropped each week. So one video a week. Russell's got a lot to share, and all of it's important. So I will see you again next week. Thank you, Russell. And
It's been a pleasure.
farewell, everyone. Take care.